The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in the year 1453 might have signaled the end of the Byzantine Empire. By no means, however, did it mark the end of the Patriarchate of Constantinople or the end of Eastern Orthodoxy. Islam drew no distinction between religion and politics. Christians in the Ottoman Empire, regardless of their ethnic origin, were classified as the Rum Millet, the Roman nation, and their church served as a form of local government. The Orthodox Church became a civil as well as a religious institution. Bishops became government officials. The Patriarch, in addition to being the spiritual leader of the Church, became the leader of a nation, the Ethnarchs. As a result, by grace of its conquerors, the Ecumenical Patriarchate played a decisive role in the survival of Orthodoxy and the Greek nation. Islamic law did not manifestly outlaw Christianity. As long as Christians submitted quietly to the supremacy of Islam, they were free to practice their faith without interference. Practical reality was a different matter altogether. Despite outward manifestations of tolerance, the Ottoman conquest plunged Orthodoxy into darkness. The Church and its officials fell prey to the greed, ambition, and corruption of politics. Everything was for sale. The ecumenical throne itself was available to the highest bidder, and the longevity of patriarchs depended on the prevailing whims of a ruling sultan. From the pinnacle of the Byzantine Empire, Christians were relegated to second-class status, their church a second-class religion. Islamic law prohibited the building of new churches and the ringing of bells. Compounding its alienation from the West, the entire Orthodox communion of the Balkans and the Near East languished in isolation, confined in a culturally and religiously alien Islamic world. Russia alone escaped that fate to aspire for leadership in Eastern Orthodoxy, precisely as its vast empire was beginning to take root. Ivan III, the Great, married a niece of the last Byzantine emperor to establish a link with Byzantium. He assumed the titles Emperor and Tsar, a Slavonic equivalent to the Roman Caesar, and adopted the double-headed eagle of Byzantium as his state emblem. The Russians presumed to be the successors to the Byzantines. The first Rome, they reasoned, had fallen to barbarians because of heresy. The second to the Turks because of sin for accepting the unholy union with the Catholic Church, the short-lived Union of Florence. Moscow was still standing, the third and last Rome, the center of Orthodox Christianity. There would be no other Rome, they said. Ivan IV the Terrible, assuming the role of champion and protector for all Orthodoxy, established his 16th century reign on that foundation and built an empire on it. With the approval of all Eastern Patriarchates, the Russian Church was recognized as autocephalous, independent of any external church authority. The Bishop of Moscow was elevated to Patriarch.
In the meantime, all the other Eastern Patriarchates remained isolated from the mainstream of European political and religious developments. Constantinople could not agree to overtures from the Protestant Reformation movement that shook the Western establishment in the 16th century. Neither was it in a position to stem the intrusion of Roman Catholic Jesuits and Protestant missionaries on Orthodox territories outside the Ottoman Empire. As a result, at the Union of Brest-Litovsk, an agreement concluded in the late 16th century, millions of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine, although allowed to retain their Eastern rites and customs, submitted to the doctrine of Rome and the jurisdiction of its Pope. The Ukrainian and other Eastern churches which in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries entered into union with the Roman Catholic Church have come to be collectively referred to as the Uniate or Eastern Catholic Churches. The recrimination and occasional violence that sometimes erupts between Uniates and Orthodox even today remains one of the sensitive areas of disagreement between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches.
Greeks, on the other hand, suffered a different fate. Under the demoralizing effect of unrelenting social pressure, it became all but impossible for them to separate church from nation. More than ever before, Hellenism and Orthodoxy became inseparably intertwined. Secretly, the Church sustained and nurtured the flickering candles of Greek culture, customs, and tradition. If it weren't for the Church, Greece would have lost all sense of national identity and unity. It was the Church that stoked the flames of liberty. It was the Church that inspired a demoralized, subservient nation to strike the banner that launched its revolution in 1821. Orthodoxy did not emerge from its long siege under the Ottomans without its share of martyrs, 11 patriarchs and 100 bishops among them. Cyril Lucaris, who served 7 times as Patriarch of Alexandria and Constantinople, was drowned. Saint Cosmas Etolos, a monk who had become the most prolific missionary in Greece, also suffered a martyr's death. The ecumenical Patriarch Gregorius V, along with 2 metropolitans and 12 bishops, was hung at the gates of the Patriarchate in retaliation for the outbreak of the Greek Revolution. Nevertheless, Ottoman rule did not erase the Orthodox faith. After the Greek uprising and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, riding the wave of 19th century militant nationalism, the Church emerged safe and sound, but with its structure permanently altered. The churches of Greece, Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria could not continue to function ecclesiastically under the jurisdiction of a patriarchate that remained isolated in the foreign and hostile environment of the Ottoman Empire. By the end of the century, they had established national, self-governing, independent churches. The ancient patriarchates of the Middle East, their strength tested by the long struggle to survive under Islam, found themselves outside the boundaries of modern Turkey. They are still surrounded by predominantly non-Christian populations, but have re-established their absolute independence from external church influence. Alexandria has extended its jurisdiction beyond Egypt and North Africa, south throughout the African continent, with especially vibrant missionary activity in East Africa.
The presence of Christianity in Africa will continue, and that means that the Patriarchate of Alexandria will survive. Africa is a continent with many Muslims, especially north of the equator. But it also has Christian Africans from the equator and below. Africa's Christianity and Africa's Islam meet, and they have a duty to find a way of life, both just and peaceful. And in this way of life, the Orthodox Patriarchate of the Orient, which has sowed its seeds in Uganda and Kenya, where we have 100,000 Orthodox Africans, will survive too. And who knows? Perhaps tomorrow, in the march of time, we shall have in the Patriarchate of Alexandria an African patriarch.
The Patriarchate of Antioch, now based in Damascus, the Syrian capital, continues to serve the Arab Christian population in Lebanon and Syria, with Arab patriarchs and bishops since the turn of the century.
Islam is a very, very important phenomenon, and one has to face it. Not in a negative way. A Christian cannot be negative in any of the situations. He has to face things, and he has to be courageous enough to speak his faith. I don't believe very much in controversies, but I believe in exchange of human existence, of human feelings, of human collaborations. Because after all, not everyone in life knows every single iota of all dogmas. Religions are not dogmas. Religions are life. And if you meet people on the level of life, then you truly meet them and better understand them.
Jerusalem, the Church of St. James, the brother of Christ, still ministers to a small, primarily Arab flock in Palestine, but provides invaluable service as the guardian and protector of Orthodox shrines in the Holy Lands.
The Patriarchate has struggled for many centuries, here in the Holy Land and in the Middle East in general, to protect our sacred national heritage and to preserve what our forefathers created. The Greek presence here dates to 232 before Christ. We came not as conquerors, nor to destroy and then leave. We came as reformers. That is why what our ancestors created today adorn the Middle East, and especially the Holy City. New excavations provide new evidence on the presence and work of the Greeks here. Our church undertook the leadership of our people after the Arab conquest of the Holy Lands. And since then, she strives to prove herself worthy of our nation, worthy of this great gift from God, who entrusted in the hands of Greeks the protection and service of the holiest pilgrimages of humanity.
Constantinople, although stripped of most of its former territories and deprived of its flock by harsh political realities, still retains its position of primacy among Orthodox episcopates. In such a shrinking world, East and West have lost their meaning, and the Ecumenical Patriarch is called upon to provide more than just spiritual leadership, emerging as an increasingly visible spokesman for worldwide orthodoxy.
As the first General Secretary of the World Council of Churches stated once, the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople was the first church in the world to call the churches for cooperation by issuing the famous encyclical of 1920. In this encyclical, the Patriarchate was saying that the churches could, for one moment, forget their theological differences and come together to cooperate in the practical field by creating a League of Churches, following the example of the League of Nations, which was created here in Geneva.
That initiative eventually gave birth to a worldwide ecumenical movement, seeking the cooperation and ultimate unification of all Christendom in a single, inseparable communion. In the first ever direct personal exchange between Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox leaders since the 15th century, Pope Paul VI and Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras, according to the Pope, a great protagonist in the reconciliation of all Christians, met in 1964. The following year, their mutual excommunications were officially lifted, and the two churches entered into dialogue.
The dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church being the most important as well as the most difficult of the bilateral theological dialogues, unfortunately, during the past 5 years is beset with great difficulty because of the dangerous revival of the immense problem of uniatism, particularly after the collapse of the communist regime of the former Soviet Union. If the authorities of the Vatican do not change their tactics on this problem, the dialogue between the two churches will continue to be restricted to one single topic, namely that of uniatism and proselytism. The fact that this year the meeting, which had been scheduled, could not take place due to the unwillingness of the majority of the Orthodox churches to attend the dialogue is indicative of the existing unfavorable atmosphere.
The near future will provide the Orthodox Church with the opportunity to come closer to Islam and enhance the dialogue and mutual understanding between Christians and Muslims.
The Orthodox Church will play a very important role in the future of the relationships between Christianity and Islam. So I am optimistic that in the next 20, 30 years, 50 years, just now, the next 30 years, we shall have a very constructive dialogue which will be for the benefit of both sides. Because as you know, Islam and Christianity have many similarities. And we have, it is a necessity for us and for them. And the ethos of Islam, the countries, these people, particularly in the Middle East, is very close to the Orthodox.
At the threshold of the third millennium, communion with other Christian denominations and dialogue with world faiths are only few of the challenges facing Orthodox Christianity. The unity and communication within the boundaries of the local Orthodox churches and the definition of an Orthodox identity in Western society are of primary concern. As countless immigrants fled poverty, war, and persecution from their Eastern European homelands, Orthodox communities flourished outside their traditional environment in Western Europe, the Americas, Australia, and the Orient. Scattered across the world, Orthodox Christians organized their communities along purely ethnic lines to create a variety of national churches with overlapping, often conflicting parish boundaries. Their need for unity and cohesion is pressing and immediate.
Here, our first and pressing problem is to have a stronger visible unity. I would hope for the development of local Orthodox churches in the United States, Australia, Britain, other countries where there are large numbers of Orthodox. I would hope before too long we shall have in each place a single jurisdiction, a single episcopate, a local church with a synod of bishops able to make decisions for their own flock locally.
Even the giant in the East emerged from its 70-year ordeal in the wasteland of militant atheism to face a new set of challenges. It is hardly possible to fathom the suffering and humiliation that Orthodox people endured in the 20th century under the systematic persecution of communist regimes. Churches were methodically desecrated, closed, and destroyed. In Russia, at one point, as many as 150 bishops were in prison. The number of martyrs is likely to exceed those who perished in the age of the catacombs and the Ottoman conquest combined. Persecution had crushed the Church, but paradoxically also protected it. Its tradition, undiluted by secular realities, was passed on intact in the home with even greater zeal by successive generations of devout grandmothers. However, having survived the grave challenges of tyranny, the reborn churches of Russia and Eastern Europe are now poised to share with worldwide orthodoxy the challenge posed by the demands of contemporary society.
In the past centuries, Orthodoxy succeeded in integrating faith and worship with the everyday life of the people. Religion came into every aspect of life and interpersonal relations. Following the Industrial Revolution and the growth of big urban centers, this immediate and unambiguous blending of religion and society started to weaken, and religion became only a part of people's concerns. This is a concern very evident in Orthodox communities in Western societies, but it may become increasingly more important in every traditional Orthodox country of the East.
Orthodox history is punctuated by a series of traumatic experiences. The conquest of Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem by Arab Muslims, the burning of Kiev by Mongol invaders, the sack of Constantinople by Crusaders and Ottomans, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and the ensuing dislocation by communism, the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Greek Orthodox from Asia Minor. From Saint Stephen, the first martyr, and the apostles Peter and Paul, through the ages to the present moment, Orthodoxy has been forged on the anvil of persecution and sacrifice.
It is small wonder that many may have deserted the Church in the hour of trial and tribulation, but greater wonder still that so many have remained faithful to assure the survival of Orthodoxy as a community and as a vital component of contemporary society. Its essence remains the spiritual life, the mystical experience, time-tested truth, all incorporated in 20 centuries of paradoxes or tradition. The Gospels, the mission of the Apostles and their successors, the teaching of the Great Fathers, dogma and canons as promulgated by the ecumenical councils, the mystery of the Eucharistic liturgy, and the experience of sacramental life.
Universal in character, Orthodox Christianity is no longer confined to the eastern part of the world. Today, it is an unlimited global resource, a vibrant, brilliant mosaic of people who differ from one another not in worship or dogma, but in culture, customs, and language alone. From New York and Helsinki to Buenos Aires and Nairobi, from London to Kiev, Tokyo to Jerusalem.
It seems to me that in the past, Orthodoxy tended to be an instinct. People were Orthodox because of their birth, because of their national identity. In the future, Orthodoxy is going to be a matter of personal commitment, increasingly. Only those people will be Orthodox who have actually chosen to be so. Their faith will need to be far more conscious. We shall have to give far more attention to the need for people to make an actual step of commitment to their faith instead of accepting it passively. We shall need to understand much better what our orthodoxy is. It remains for so many of us a hidden treasure still.
The universal appeal of Christian orthodoxy lies in the heart of its humanity. Philanthropia, God's loving kindness toward mankind. Open, graceful, compassionate, and forgiving. Orthodoxy means living not in the anguish of mankind, but in the glory of God. It celebrates not Christ the victim, but Christ the victor. It emphasizes not so much satisfaction as much as salvation of humanity. Our relationship with God is not legal, it is spiritual. Each of us, man, woman, and child, forever remains a creature of God, plasma theou. As such, all of us indeed carry within us a hidden treasure.